Are you losing money sports betting and you don't understand why? Hello, my name is Logan. I'm a Harvard student studying statistics, astrophysics, and computer science, and I'm here today to talk to you about the difference between bad sports betting and unlucky sports betting. Now, those two might sound like the same thing, and ultimately, in both cases, you'd be losing money. But there's one very important distinction. A bad sports bettor is going to lose money in the long term. An unlucky sports bettor can make money in the long term. If you're making mathematically profitable sports bets, you're still going to have days, weeks, and maybe even months where you lose money. But in the long term, you will always come out on top. But how do you tell the difference between the two? In this video, I'll be breaking down what good sports betting is, how to tell if you're making good sports bets, what closing line value is and how that all ties together, and I'll be helping you to adjust your strategy to make sure you're making money in the long term as a sports bettor. Let's take a look at an example of when good sports betting gets unlucky. Here we are on the bet tracker for OddsJam's positive EV tool, or mathematically profitable betting tool, for the state of Connecticut in the month of June. You can see for June as a whole, this tool lost over $4,000. It had 18 days where it lost money and 12 days where it made money. So the stats don't look very much in the favor of this particular sports betting tool. You can see it lost over 5% per wager across over 600 bets. And if we look at the graph of actual profit versus expected profit, you can see the actual profit or loss was minus $4,000, whereas the expected profit was over $2,500. So based on this data, it seems like this betting tool isn't very useful. But let's zoom out and take a look at its performance all time instead of just in the month of June. If we adjust to all time, you can see that this betting tool has made over $30,000 since it started tracking data back in February. So even though in June it happened to lose $4,000, that $4,000 is sort of just a blip on the radar compared to the $30,000 that it's made in the last 4 months. And this is the importance of understanding whether you're getting unlucky as a sports bettor or you're making bad sports bets. Because imagine this tool started tracking in June instead of tracking in February. You would only be able to see right now that it's down $4,000, and you would probably assume that it's a bad sports betting tool. But you have to be able to measure whether or not something is a good sports bet by a different metric other than just whether or not it wins or loses. So let's talk about what closing line value is. To understand what closing line value is, let's take a look at an example. Imagine the Chiefs are playing the Bengals in the AFC Championship game, and you place a bet on the Bengals at plus 120. Now, a couple hours before the game, Patrick Mahomes falls down the stairs and breaks his leg. Now, all of the lines on the game are going to swing from favoring the Chiefs to favoring the Bengals, and your bet at plus 120 looks like a great bet. Lines swing all the time in sports betting, and the most frequent reason that lines swing is because books catch that they're giving out a profitable line and want to adjust it. So a very good indication of whether or not you're taking profitable sports bets is whether or not the books adjust the line that you're betting on after you bet it. So the average sports bettor who's picking randomly is going to beat closing line value at about 50% of the time and lose the other 50% of the time. A profitable sports bettor, though, will beat closing line value maybe 70% of the time and lose 30% of the time, because when they place a bet, the sportsbooks adjust that bet because they know it was a profitable bet. So by tracking your bets and seeing whether or not they beat closing line value, you can tell whether you're placing a good bet, whether it wins or loses. Here we are back on the bet tracker for the positive EV tool in the state of Connecticut, and let's see how it did versus closing line value. You can see in the month of June it beat closing line value 71% of the time, which means lines swung in favor of the bets that this tool placed over 70% of the time, whereas it only went against the bets placed around 29% of the time. Now, if we zoom out and look at all time instead of just the month of June, we're going to see that there's a very similar number. It beat CLV 72% of the time, whereas it was only 71 in the month of June. Those two numbers are statistically indistinguishable, which means that the month of June, it was placing just as good bets as it was in February, March, April, and May. So there's no real difference here other than the outcome of the bets. It was still taking very high quality bets. Then it's very important to understand that good sports bettors are going to go on losing streaks. And in this case, in the state of Connecticut, you were probably on a losing streak during the month of June. And that's just going to happen. But if you see that you're beating closing line value, you know you're taking mathematically smart bets, and that over the long term, you will be making money. All right, so now that you understand that closing line value is a really useful tool to tell whether or not a bet that you're placing is a mathematically profitable bet, I hope that you want to be tracking your bets to see whether or not they're beating closing line value. But it's not easy to do that by hand by any means. So I highly recommend trying out the OddsJam free bet tracker. It's very simple to use. You just go to OddsJam, look up whatever game you're placing a bet on, find the bet, tell OddsJam how much money you're placing on it, and OddsJam will track both the outcome of the bet and whether or not it beats closing line value. So if you're beating closing line value less than 50% of the time, you know you're making mathematically negative sports bets and you can expect to lose money in the long term. If you're beating it maybe between 50 and 65% of the time, you know you're taking decent bets and you're probably going to be making a little bit of money in the long term. If you're beating it over 65% of the time, you're probably taking very good bets. You should give yourself props because even if you're going on a losing streak, you can expect to make very good returns in the long term. So definitely try out OddsJam's free bet tracker to see whether or not you're taking good bets. All right, so now I think we've pretty thoroughly covered how you can tell if you're getting unlucky as a good sports bettor or if you're simply taking bad sports bets by looking at closing line value. Keep in mind, with OddsJam's bet tracker, you can do this entirely for free. So I hope you learned a lot from this video. I appreciate you guys for sticking around, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.